I was kicked out of my house on Christmas Eve by my own mother. She stood there in the driveway, wearing a festive red sweater with a reindeer on it, arms crossed like a warden. She didn't even look me in the eye when she said it. "You're just too much, Natalie. We can't do this anymore. Too much?" At 13, fresh out of the hospital after an emergency appendectomy, I was apparently too much to love, too much to care for. My stitches still raw, my bag half-zipped. I was dropped off like a return package at the ER lobby. Mom didn't even walk me inside. She peeled away in the snowstorm, taillights blinking like some cruel punchline. I waited. I waited until the nurse at the desk asked where my parents were, and all I could say was, "They left." The next few months were a blur of paperwork, shelter placements, caseworkers with tight smiles, and other kids with quieter pain. I kept thinking it was a misunderstanding, a punishment that would pass. I kept staring at the hospital doors, convinced she'd walk back in, apologize, and bring me home. She never did. And she never gave a reason beyond that line, "too much." Too emotional, too sensitive, too demanding. That's what they always said when I dared to cry at the way my brother Andrew was praised for existing while I was criticized for feeling. He brought home a C, and it was at least he tried. I brought home an A, and it was, why not an A? He broke a vase? Boys will be boys. I forgot to do the dishes once. World War III. Andrew was the golden boy, the miracle baby, the planned child. I was the afterthought, the oops, the emotional sponge they used to soak up their dysfunction and wring out their disappointments. I cooked, I cleaned, I covered for their fights, and I stayed quiet, so quiet. Because if I wasn't, the punishment got worse. Silence was the only thing they couldn't twist into a weapon. The state finally placed me in a group home after 2 months in emergency care. It wasn't terrible. It was worse than terrible sometimes, but it was honest. Nobody pretended there. You knew who had your back and who didn't. You learned not to cry unless it mattered. You learned how to look out for yourself. I stopped hoping for phone calls. I stopped expecting letters. And eventually, I stopped checking the mailroom altogether. By 16, I was aging out. At 18, I had a scholarship. At 26, I became a doctor. And at 33, I saved my mother's life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. See, I never told anyone the full story. Not the nice foster parents I stayed with for a year. Not the therapist who tried to get me to talk about my inner child. Not the other residents who shared their battle scars in midnight confessionals. I never told them I remembered every second of that Christmas Eve. Every snowflake that hit the windshield as I begged her not to leave me. She looked straight ahead. Andrew had gotten engaged the night before. There was a party. I wasn't invited. I had caught the flu from the hospital, and Mom told me not to ruin the mood. I stayed in my room. I heard them laughing, heard champagne popping. I remember whispering to myself, maybe she'll bring me cake. She didn't. She brought me a plastic bag with my clothes and a ride to the ER. And now, decades later, she lay unconscious in my ER, hooked to tubes and machines, her life in my hands. I hadn't spoken to her in 20 years. Not since a postcard came for me when I was 15 that said, "Hope you're doing well. Take care, Mom." That was it. That was the love she had left for me. So when I saw her name on the intake form, my hands went cold. I stared at the clipboard like it was a ghost. Marjorie Whitman, 58, hypertensive emergency. Brought in alone. No emergency contact. No family listed. Just like she wanted. I stood frozen. It was like the room lost all oxygen. I couldn't hear the monitors. Couldn't feel the stethoscope still hanging around my neck. My vision tunneled, and all I could see was that name in sterile, blocky print. Marjorie Whitman, age 58. No emergency contact. Of course she didn't list one, because that would require acknowledging she had family. A daughter. Me. I walked out of the intake room without saying a word and went straight to the staff lounge. My hands shook as I poured stale coffee, gripping the pot so hard I thought it might shatter. I hadn't thought about her in years. Not really. Not until now, with her fragile life dependent on the system I had built myself into like armor. I wanted to scream, to throw the clipboard, to storm into her room and demand answers she would never give, but I didn't, because that's not what I do. That's never what I did. Instead, I composed myself, walked back in, and checked the monitors. BP still dangerously high. She was unconscious but stable for now. The attending physician hadn't recognized the name. No one on staff knew who she was to me. They didn't know that 20 years ago, this woman left her 13-year-old daughter to rot in a hospital, like spoiled food she couldn't be bothered to refrigerate. And now, I was her doctor. The next day, I volunteered to stay on that wing. When asked why, I shrugged. Low census. Figured I'd help out. Lie. I needed to see her face. I needed to know what time had done to her. When I entered her room that afternoon, she was awake. Our eyes met, her pupils dilated, her lips parted slightly. And then, "Do I know you?" That was her first sentence to me in 2 decades. I didn't answer. Just checked her IV line and noted her vitals. It was like watching a video of someone's death in slow motion. She didn't even look like I remembered. The tight jaw that once snapped with venom at every minor infraction was slack now. Her once perfectly dyed hair was a tired gray, thin around the temples. Her arms, those arms that had shoved me into the cold, were veined and trembling. She looked so small. "Your blood pressure spiked. You had a hypertensive crisis," I said. "You're lucky you got here when you did." She blinked. "I didn't. I don't remember getting here. You were alone." "Oh," her voice wobbled. "My son. He must not have answered. He's busy. Andrew just moved out of state. New job. He's very important now, you know. Vice president or something." She smiled, weakly, proudly. That same pride I used to see reserved only for him. I wanted to laugh. Loud. Bitterly. I wanted to say, "Yeah? The golden boy? The one who ghosted you when the money dried up?" But I didn't. Instead, I said, "He didn't list himself as an emergency contact." That wiped the smug little smirk right off her face. The next few days were a surreal form of emotional whiplash. She kept trying to place me, asking for my name. I refused to wear my badge in her room. I answered questions clinically, stayed detached. She never remembered. Or maybe she did and she was playing stupid. Classic Marjorie. But something in her started to shift. She got quieter, more unsettled. On the 4th night, I found her sitting up, staring blankly at the wall. Her voice was hoarse when she said, "You remind me of someone. I get that a lot." She looked at me closely. "There's something about your eyes. You wouldn't happen to be?" She trailed off. I didn't answer, just walked out. The silence hit her harder than any confirmation ever could. The nurses gossiped about her. She'd been cold, difficult, demanding. One even said, "She told me her kids don't talk to her. Wonder why?" I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I wasn't ready. Not yet. The next week, she deteriorated again. Another spike. Possible organ damage. I worked through the night, kept her stable. She came to while I was adjusting her meds. This time, she grabbed my hand. Her voice broke. "Natalie?" I didn't pull away. I didn't confirm. I just looked at her, my face calm, blank. "Is it you?" she whispered. Silence. Then I said, "We're done with this conversation. You need rest." And I left her there, weeping into a thin hospital pillow like a broken-down ghost. I stopped taking her case after that, transferred her care, told the attending I needed to focus on another patient, technically true. But the real reason? I had to make a decision, because something in me had cracked wide open. The quiet, obedient child they abandoned? She was still in there, but now she had a medical degree, a bank account, and a list of contacts longer than my mother's excuses. I wasn't that girl anymore. I started digging. I pulled records, called the old caseworker who'd retired to Florida, reached out to a family friend I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, someone who used to babysit Andrew and me. I wanted to know everything. What I found made my stomach churn. Not only had my mother lied to CPS about having no relatives willing to help, but she'd also cashed out a joint savings account set up in my name by my grandparents. Nearly $42,000 gone before I turned 14. My grandparents had left it specifically for my future. I never saw a cent. The money disappeared the same month Andrew got his first car. One couldn't breathe. That account was supposed to help me after what happened. It was their way of saying, "We see you." And she'd stolen it. They were gone by then, died in a car crash when I was 15. She never even told me. The betrayal hit like a gut punch. It wasn't just emotional abuse, it was theft, manipulation, and worst of all, she got away with it until now, because now I had the power. Now I had names, numbers, and contacts. Now I had proof, and I had a plan. When I say I didn't sleep for 2 days after finding out about that stolen savings account, I'm not exaggerating. I couldn't close my eyes without seeing her signature on that withdrawal form. Marjorie Whitman, always so put together, so righteous, committing outright theft against her own daughter like it was a PTA bake sale. I sat on my couch with the documents fanned out in front of me like a murder board. My therapist always told me to stop disassociating into spreadsheets, but honestly, numbers made more sense than feelings ever did. Feelings got you kicked out of your house on Christmas Eve. Numbers gave you leverage. I found out she moved the money into a separate joint account with Andrew. Not even subtle, just poof, gone. He used it to cover college prep. You know, like the BMW he crashed his sophomore year, or the Cancun trip he posted about while I was working my 3rd shift in the group home kitchen. But it got better. That family friend I called Janine, my old babysitter, she had no idea what had happened to me. She thought I moved away with relatives. When I told her the truth, she cried, literally sobbed on the phone. Then she said something that nearly stopped my heart. Your grandma left you her jewelry box. What? Yeah. You know the blue one she always kept on her dresser? She left it for you in the will. Marjorie said you didn't want it. My mouth went dry. I remembered that box. Dark blue velvet. Gold latch. I used to sneak into her room just to run my fingers over it. It smelled like her perfume gardenia and talcum powder. I remembered her calling me her clever little doctor. I was 9, I didn't know what she meant then, I do now. I asked Janine if she remembered anything else. Your grandma tried to set up a trust for you after your parents got divorced. She didn't trust Marjorie. Said she wasn't too proud to ask for help but too selfish not to take it anyway. But then your grandpa died and, well, you know how things go. Yeah, I did. I hung up that call shaking. It was never about me being too much. It was about me being inconvenient. I was the extra plate at the table when she only wanted a party of 3. When I got sick, she saw an escape. She didn't want to mother anymore. Not when Andrew was starting his college tours and she had cocktail parties to plan. I wanted to burn the world down. Instead, I started calling lawyers. One, in particular, remembered the old estate. Said he'd wondered what happened to me. I asked him for a copy of my grandparents' will, and wouldn't you know, there it was, in black and white. To our granddaughter, Natalie Whitman, we leave the contents of our safe deposit box at First United Savings. Only problem? The bank said it had been accessed in 2006. I never had a key. Guess who did? The withdrawal signature matched my mother's. I didn't even know you could feel grief and rage simultaneously. I thought they came in waves. Turns out, they can punch you at the same time and leave you gasping. I needed more than just closure. I needed justice. Around this time, my cousin Rachel called me. I hadn't heard from her in a decade. She said she was in town, saw my name on the hospital's directory, and wanted to say hi. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to call back. Turned out, Rachel was the only person in the entire extended family who knew what happened but had been silenced. She told everyone you went to live with your dad's family out west, Rachel confessed. She said you were too unstable to live with her, that you chose to leave. We were told not to contact you. She lied to everyone. She lied to me. I believed her until last year. I started asking questions after she told me not to invite you to my wedding. Said it would be drama. My jaw clenched. She's always allergic to accountability. Rachel paused. Want help? I blinked. With what? Whatever you're planning. For the first time in years, I felt its support. Not from a colleague. Not from a therapist. But from someone who saw the same woman behind the pearls and fake smiles. Hell yes, I whispered. We started collecting everything. Rachel got in touch with extended family and began asking pointed questions. I filed a quiet civil inquiry into the misappropriated inheritance. Nothing too flashy. Not yet. But I had a plan. Rachel planted the seeds. She mentioned to Aunt Laura that I'd become a doctor, that I worked at a major hospital, that I was in town. Within a week, I got a Facebook message from Andrew. Hey Nat, long time. I'd love to catch up. I stared at it for 15 minutes before replying. Sure, let's get coffee. My treat. He picked a fancy cafe in the arts district. He looked stressed, a little balder, a lot smugger. "I'm glad you reached out," he said, like he hadn't ignored every message I ever sent between the ages of 13 and 17. "You look great, very successful." "I am," he laughed nervously. "Mom's been talking about you." "Of course she has. She says you're working at Street Luke's. That true?" I nodded. Why the sudden interest? He cleared his throat. "Well, she's not doing great, health-wise. She's worried about long-term care. I was thinking we should sit down and talk about options, as a family." I tilted my head. Funny, didn't know we were one. The words stunned him. I could see it. He tried to recover. "Look, I know things were complicated, but she's still our mom." "You mean your mom," I corrected. "Mine left me at a hospital and stole my inheritance." He froze. The color drained from his face. "What? I have the bank records, Andrew. I have the will, the safe deposit logs, the lawyer's testimony." His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on the dock. I leaned in, calm, controlled, razor sharp. "And I'm not just coming for the money. I'm coming for the truth." Andrew didn't say anything for a long time. He sat there, slack-jawed in his overpriced blazer, looking like a man who had just realized the ground beneath his designer loafers wasn't floor, it was ice. And it was cracking. "Nat, come on. You can't seriously think I knew about all that," he finally said, hands up like I was holding a weapon. "You were on the joint account," I replied flatly. "The one she transferred the money into." "My money." His eyes flicked to the window, back to me. "She said it was a family fund, that it was for emergencies." I leaned in, just slightly. "Oh, you mean like the emergency of your spring break trip to Cabo? Or the emergency of your second engagement ring after you cheated on the first fiancé?" He had the gall to look offended. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is being abandoned at 13 and robbed of $42,000 by the woman who gave birth to me. What's not fair is being treated like garbage while you got a car, a college fund, and a seat at every damn holiday dinner." His voice dropped. "Mom's not the same anymore. She's sick." I sat back in my chair, calm, controlled, because rage doesn't need to yell. Not anymore. "That's interesting," I said, "because she was healthy as a horse when she forged my signature. When she told people I ran away. When she erased me from my own grandparents' legacy." I pulled a small manila folder from my bag and slid it across the table. "What's this?" he asked, fingers twitching. "Proof, bank statements, copy of the will, withdrawals made under false pretenses, her lies, your involvement." He didn't open it. He just stared at the folder like it might bite him. "Look," he said quietly, "I get it. You're mad." "I'm not mad," I said, standing up. "I'm meticulous. And you and Marjorie are about to find out just how meticulous I can be." I filed the civil suit 2 weeks later. Fraud, theft, emotional distress. I made sure the paperwork included every scrap of documentation. I attached copies of the will, records of the safe deposit box withdrawal, letters from the estate lawyer confirming my grandmother's original intentions. And then I sent a copy of the complaint directly to my mother's hospital room, certified mail, delivered at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday 10 minutes before visiting hours. Rachel called me later that day, said my mother looked like someone had poured ice water into her veins. She didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared at the envelope like it was a loaded gun. "She knows it's real now," Rachel whispered. "Good, because I wasn't done." A week later, I filed a motion to freeze her assets, what little was left. The home she lived in had been refinanced multiple times, but it was still technically hers. A lawyer I hired found out she had recently tried to list Andrew as sole heir in a newly updated will. We had that invalidated pending investigation of undue influence. I wasn't just cutting her off financially. I was cutting her off emotionally, socially, legally. She had taken my name off everything. So I returned the favor. I went to the hospital board and formally recused myself from her care, citing conflict of interest. I made sure her new attending physician was someone I trusted, but not someone sympathetic. She called me the next day, left a voicemail. "Natalie, please, don't do this. I didn't know you were still. I didn't think. Her voice cracked. I made mistakes. I was overwhelmed. You were so difficult. You don't understand what it was like raising 2 kids alone. I played it twice. Then I deleted it. 3 days later, she sent a letter to my office, a handwritten one, on her old floral stationery. I didn't open it. I had it scanned, digitally archived, and sent back unopened with a post-it that simply said, "Return to sender." That's when the calls started from extended family, friends, distant cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. Rachel had been busy, she told everyone. And the best part? She used their own words. She posted screenshots, pictures from the engagement party where I'd been purposely excluded, photos of me as a child, doing dishes while Andrew opened gifts, journal entries from her teen years ones she'd kept, recounting all the things she saw but didn't understand at the time. She called it, "The Other Sister, a story we forgot to ask about." It went semi-viral, nothing explosive, but enough that people started talking. Enough that Marjorie couldn't hide behind "she left us" anymore. She'd tried damage control. Posted a photo of me and Andrew as kids. Captioned it, "No matter the distance, a mother's love never fades." I commented, "Except when it's left in the ER waiting room." Unfollowed. Blocked. Reported for misinformation, the suit dragged on for months. But I didn't care. I had time. I had resources. And more than that, I had peace. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was screaming into a void. I wasn't the uninvited guest anymore. I was the one holding the keys. Andrew stopped responding entirely. His wife left him, apparently. She didn't love being married to someone involved in an inheritance scandal. The job he bragged about? Quietly let him go. Word had spread. Marjorie tried one last time. Showed up to the hospital against medical advice. Claimed she needed a second opinion. I was in the middle of reviewing charts when she walked in. She looked frail, sunken, pathetic. "I just want to talk," she said. "I didn't even look up. You'll need to schedule that through legal counsel." Her lip trembled. "Natalie, please. You're my daughter." I finally looked at her, met her eyes. "No," I said. "I'm your consequence." She left. I don't know if she'll recover fully. Physically, maybe. Emotionally, she's rotting in the silence she once forced me to live in. The golden boy is gone. The lie unraveled. The sympathy revoked. And me? I'm not just surviving, I'm writing the ending. I didn't celebrate when the lawsuit settled. No champagne, no revenge playlist, just silence. It was a clean ruling. The judge sided with me. Stated clearly that the funds from the inheritance were misappropriated and that the actions of my mother and, by extension, Andrew constituted willful and negligent misrepresentation, resulting in the financial and emotional disenfranchisement of a minor. They used those words, emotional disenfranchisement. Felt like someone finally put a label on it. Not the one she gave me growing up, dramatic, difficult, ungrateful, but the truth. I hadn't been too much. I had just been inconvenient. She was ordered to pay restitution. Not that there was much to collect. Between the liens, the medical bills, and the court fees, she was already neck deep. But that wasn't the point. It wasn't about the money. It was about the record, the line in the sand. It was about finally proving to the world and to myself that I hadn't imagined it, that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't deserved it. That leaving a 13-year-old in a hospital with a duffel bag and a scar didn't make you overwhelmed, it made you a monster. She moved out of her house soon after. I think she's staying with some church friend now, someone who doesn't know the whole story. Or maybe they do, and they're just the type who believe forgiveness means forgetting. I don't. She tried to contact me again twice. The first was another letter, this one written on lined notebook paper. She begged for a visit. Said she wanted to rebuild, now that the air had been cleared. The second was more desperate. An email to my work address. It read, "Natalie, I'm alone. Andrew doesn't speak to me anymore. I don't have anyone left. You've made your point. Please, just talk to me. I need you." I forwarded it straight to my attorney, blocked the address, and I slept like a baby. It's funny, the first breath you take when the weight's finally off, it doesn't even feel like breathing. It's more like resurfacing, like realizing you've been holding your breath for 20 years, and suddenly your lungs remember what oxygen feels like. I moved. Sold my little condo, bought a small house by the coast. Something with morning light and sea air and enough space for peace to bloom. I have a little herb garden. I'm learning to paint. I eat breakfast barefoot on my back deck with my dog curled up at my feet. I started volunteering at a youth shelter, the kind I used to live in. One of the girls there reminds me of me. Smart, quiet, always watching. She asked me once, "Do you think people can change?" And I told her the truth. People change, but not always in the ways you want, and not always for you. I don't give them speeches about resilience. I don't pretend it gets easier. I just sit with them, hand them paintbrushes or first aid kits, and remind them they aren't alone. That's what I needed back then. Not empty promises, just presence. Rachel visits often. We laugh about how twisted everything was, sometimes bitterly, sometimes genuinely. We've become something that looks suspiciously like sisters. I stayed up with her the night her dad had heart surgery. She held my hand through a panic attack I didn't even know I was having when I saw someone who looked like Andrew at the supermarket. Healing doesn't look like Instagram. It doesn't smell like candles and yoga mats. Sometimes it looks like you, sobbing into your cereal at 7 a.m. because you finally realize you never ruined anything, you just survived it. Sometimes it looks like deleting voicemails without guilt. Sometimes it's driving past your childhood home and not stopping. I did that recently, took the long way back from a weekend trip. Drove through the old neighborhood. Everything looked smaller. The hedges were overgrown. The paint was chipping. I parked across the street and just stared at it for a minute. The window where I used to sit and do homework, cracked. The tree I used to climb, gone. She was never home when it mattered. And now, neither am I. Andrew never reached out again. Last I heard, he moved to Nevada, trying to start fresh. His LinkedIn is empty, his Facebook deleted. Maybe he learned something, maybe not, doesn't matter. I don't carry that weight anymore. I stopped explaining my story to people. Stopped oversharing, over-justifying, over-apologizing. The only people who matter are the ones who never needed the whole backstory to believe me. I'm still a doctor, still saving lives. But now, I save one more, mine. Every single day, I choose not to go back, not to answer, not to explain. I choose boundaries over blood. I choose peace over performance. I choose myself. And when people ask me what happened to my family, I just smile. They're not in my life anymore. Sometimes they push. "Oh no, did you have a falling out?" And I say, "No." I finally stood up. Because that's the truth. I didn't fall out of anything. I climbed out. They say I'm cold. They say I'm unforgiving. They say I'm heartless. But for once, I put my heart first. And that's not heartless. That's healing. Story 2. Julia is my name. I am a 27-year-old employee at a small Seattle interior design company. I adore my job, even if it's busy. One of the few things I get to pick for myself in my life is this. The others? In my own family, I hardly have a voice. Melissa is my older sister. She is 4 years my senior. She has 3 6-year-old boy triplets and is married. Melissa is the type of person that commands attention and attention. And my folks believe it to be entirely logical for some reason. I'm always the fallback option. Even when I'm trying to have fun, I always find myself back on aunt duty. I babysit when I have spare time and when I'm exhausted. I had been looking forward to our family's trip to the Oregon coast last year. I had asked for an early leave of absence. I can't wait to see an art show that I haven't seen in years, stroll along the beach, and visit coffee cafes by the water. My mother informed me that she had reserved a hotel room for the entire family and that I would be able to unwind this time. That sounds fantastic, doesn't it? When we arrived, however, I discovered that Melissa and her husband had their own apartment with a balcony overlooking the beach, while I would be sharing a room with the 3 boys. My mother grinned and handed me the key before I could even react. "Julia, you are adored by the lads. They will not cause any problems." Not a problem. One wept for a lost teddy bear the first night. A third repeatedly asked me if he may have some munchies at midnight, while another frantically searched for the TV remote. I hardly slept since I was so tired. I wished I could disappear while I lay awake in a completely black room, listening to little snores and labored breathing. I made an effort to see the show for only an hour the next morning. This vacation was the one thing I really wanted to do. However, Melissa texted me as soon as I was done getting ready. Where are you heading? Josh is ready to leave. Could you stay with the kids for a while? That portion grew to about 3 hours. You're staying for free, sweetheart, my mother remarked kindly when I brought it up to her. You ought to lend a hand a bit. I wanted to let out a loud cry. I wasn't taking advantage of anyone. I work. I am self-sufficient. I took PTO expressly to be here, and I paid for my own bus ticket. However, I always encountered disapproving looks when I attempted to push back. In my own family, I felt alienated. I only went to the beach once during that whole trip. Melissa sent pictures from spa cafes every day. A foot massage parlor, too. Me? Cleaning up cookie crumbs, changing the children's clothes, and responding to Aunt Julia's never-ending questions took up the majority of my time. Can I? Back then, I didn't say much. In solitude, I just packed my belongings. And I made a self-promise at the conclusion of the trip that I would never do it again. However, I was mistaken. My folks are already making plans for the next family vacation this year, as if everything would go as it had. I didn't get any questions. They just sent a message along with the itinerary. Vacation in the summer. All of us are traveling together, the same as each year. I read the message in the chat room for the family group. My hands are shaking. Do they honestly believe that I would immediately return to my duty as a babysitting aunt? I began typing a reply. I wasn't going to be silent this time. This year's trip will be a lot of fun, I thought as I gazed at a message from my mother on my laptop. Julia, are you riding with us once more? I have 2 rooms reserved. One for ourselves, one for the children. I inhaled deeply before responding. Thanks, Mom, but I'll be driving myself this year. My own room has already been reserved. My phone rang less than 3 minutes later. Mom was the one. What are you saying, Julia? Why reserve a room for yourself? I've already made all the arrangements. I want my own space, Mom. I hardly had a minute to myself last year. A true getaway is what I need. A little stillness fell. Then, with a hint of disappointment, her voice fell. However, that implies that you are severing your ties to the family. Melissa will be responsible for taking care of the children alone, and who will assist her when she needs a break? Calmly but firmly, I responded, Mom, I'm not the nanny. I make my own money by working. I am an adult. I'm not going to make the same mistake I did last year. Melissa texted me a lengthy, tearful message that evening. She claimed to be exhausted, overburdened, and misled by my lack of initiative. She reminded me that the least I could do was to assist out, because I'm still unmarried and childless. I took a while to respond. I had to ponder before I acted out of rage. However, after reading what she had written, all I wanted was for our family to enjoy a great trip. And now you're behaving as though you've suffered a serious injury. Something inside of me snapped as I put down my phone. Dad called a few days later. He wasn't upset, just worried. Do you actually intend to travel alone? Indeed, Father. I reserved a private room at a nearby hotel. I'll participate in the group exercises. But the others, I want to make my own decision. You know, Melissa is really upset. Dad, I used to be upset too. Very angry. However, nobody appeared to notice. I was expecting him to try to persuade me, but all he did was sigh. I understand. Melissa posted a message in the group chat 3 days later. Unmissable. Go ahead and read. Julia, enjoy your own vacation. However, if you sacrifice everything for your desire for independence, don't expect the family to be pleased. You're not allowed to do that. I added an additional layer of privacy protection to my hotel reservation, but I didn't respond. I planned my entire day, including a sunrise hike, a coastal craft workshop, and, of course, an afternoon at my favorite gallery. This trip was not going to be about swallowing my frustration or babysitting. My entire 20s had been spent trying to please other people, maintaining order while my own needs were continuously neglected. I was going to be heard this time. The night before departure, Mom sent a final message. We'll wait for you at the rest stop as planned. Even if you're not riding with us, I hope you'll still come. I read it in silence. I don't hate them. I just refuse to keep playing the role that's been draining me for years. At dawn, I left early. The air was cool and fresh. My suitcase sat neatly in the back seat. My favorite playlist played softly. I smiled for the first time. I was heading somewhere for me, not for anyone else. And this vacation, no matter what happens, I won't let anyone push me back into a supporting role. This is my trip, and I'll live every moment of it. I had just checked into the hotel when my phone rang. I didn't need to look to know who it was. I took a deep breath and answered, "Where are you?" Melissa's voice ripped through the speaker, cold as steel. "I just checked in," I said, trying to stay calm. "Private room." "Like I told you, private room." She chuckled a harsh, joyless laugh. "Julia, are you truly doing this? Turning our family trip into your own personal getaway?" "No, I'm still joining the group stuff," I said gently, "but I also have the right to relax in my own manner." "I can't believe this," Melissa snapped. "I'm juggling 3 kids. Josh is always on business calls, and Mom and Dad aren't getting any younger. Who do you think is going to help me if you simply disappear like this?" I closed my eyes, observing myself. "Melissa, I'm not vanishing. Just like last year, I won't be an unpaid assistant." "I am no longer 19. You're still unmarried, though. No children, no actual obligations other than yourself." A harsh, angry tone began to creep into my sister's voice. "Julia and I have a lot of spare time. All I need is a little assistance, only a bit." Is that truly excessive? I tightened my hold on the phone. "I am not your fallback option in case of burnout. I have a life and a job." "Melissa, I also need to relax." The person on the other end paused. Then Melissa broke out in tears. "I'm worn out. Julia, not a single good night's sleep has been experienced by me. I'm caught in this never-ending cycle of exhaustion while you're free and at ease, and you can't give up anything to assist me. Even when my heart plummeted, I persisted. You decided to become a mommy. I honor that. However, you cannot ask me to give up my life because you are dissatisfied with the person you choose. You're the center of attention now? No, it's about understanding my boundaries. I made that obvious, and I've discovered that no one else will defend them if I don't." There was quiet at the end of the call. With my heart still pounding with emotion, I put the phone down. I knew the storm wasn't done yet and that Melissa would inform her mother. Mom did indeed call an hour later. Although she wasn't shouting, there was disappointment in her voice. "What are you doing, Julia? Melissa's in a lot of pain. Would you mind being a bit more accommodating?" "Mom?" "Slowly," I said. I was as adaptable as I possibly be last year. I sacrificed my freedom, my time, and my energy. I didn't even get enough sleep. And you never once inquired about my well-being during all of this. All you asked was whether I could assist Melissa. She said nothing. I'm sick of being the one that everyone ignores, even though I adore this family. I don't want that vacation if all you see in me is a short-term solution to other people's issues. Mom let out a sigh. "You've evolved. Julia, Mom, I've matured." I wasn't sure if they actually understood or if I was simply acting rebelliously. However, I was certain of one thing. I had never before given in to pressure from relatives or whatever followed. I had changed from saying yes only to maintain harmony. I went for a solitary stroll on the beach that evening. The sky and gold were illuminated by the sunset. I had a peculiar, serene clarity as the ocean wind blew over my hair. For the first time, I wasn't betraying myself. Even though I knew I may be disturbing other people, I never imagined sharing any personal information online, much less about my family. However, I felt suffocated after the call with Mom and Melissa's passive-aggressive texts. I needed to express myself, not to vent, but to get my thoughts straight. I made an anonymous Reddit account, went to the informal Life Stories forum, and wrote about my sister getting her own room while I had to share my vacation from the previous year. I described how, simply because I wasn't married or a mother, my relatives thought I was accessible. I didn't include names or localities in my details. Am I wrong for wanting a real vacation for myself? I said at the conclusion. I had no idea it would go viral, but within hours, hundreds of people had left comments, the most of which were in favor of me. I was too patient, they said. I should have drawn the line long ago, according to others. Many told similar tales in which independence was viewed as selfishness and self-sacrifice as obligation. Reading every response made me feel both happy and sad happy that I wasn't the only one who had been forced into supporting roles in our own life. Then the unexpected event occurred. Melissa came upon the post. At 6 a.m., she called me. The following morning, as I watched the dawn while enjoying coffee on my hotel balcony. Was that anything you wrote? She made a demand. She spoke sharply. I maintained my composure. You knew it was me. How could I not? Do you believe that you are anonymous? You went into great depth about everything. Who wouldn't be aware? It has to do with me. I didn't provide names. However, you made fun of me in front of thousands of people. How many people are calling me selfish right now, do you know? Melissa, I didn't force anyone to speak. They're responding to what they read, I said. And the truth was what I wrote. A little stillness fell. Then she broke down in tears. This time, it was with rage rather than hurt. Julia, you ruined my reputation. I was humiliated in front of the world by you. She was more concerned with appearance than with the truth, so I didn't respond. For her, appearances were more important than people's emotions. Mom sent me a message 3 hours later. Did you actually do that? You made an online post about our family. I returned the type. Yes, Mother, because nobody would have listened if I hadn't spoken up. She was first upset. She accused me of hurting my sister and being ungrateful. Then she began to read. Not the post alone. Strangers' comments on the words. Unambiguous, just impartial. She made another call that evening, this time in a quieter tone. That's not how I expected people to see it. You were exaggerating, I thought. Mom, how many times have I overstated? I asked, but until someone else said it, nobody paid attention. Melissa didn't get back to me after that call. Dad, however, called. He didn't say much. I just spoke with your sister with your parents. We must all have a proper discussion. I do want you to know, though, I apologize for not seeing it sooner. Almost anything. I was taken aback. I couldn't recall the last time I'd heard my father apologize. I received a message from an unexpected source that evening. Josh, Melissa's spouse, I apologize for allowing you to be used. Melissa and I are conversing. She needs to change, in my opinion. In years, for the first time, I received the impression that a family member genuinely supported me, not out of duty, because they recognized the truth, not for the sake of peace. Mom contacted me again with a brief but serious message 2 days after my post became viral. Julia, the trip has been canceled. I went cold. It was a sudden surge of feeling, not astonishment. A part of me was relieved. There was despair in another portion. After making so many sacrifices, I had yearned for a personal vacation. However, I paid for the truth in the end rather than gaining that freedom, being made public too soon and too loudly. Melissa hasn't actually talked to anyone since your post. Mom let out a sigh. Josh fled to be with his folks in Olympia since he was so angry. I'm with your dad. We need time to think. I could tell by just one statement that things had gotten worse than I had anticipated. I got a message from Josh that night. I would prefer to meet face to face, me and you alone, not via Melissa, not via your parents. We got together in a peaceful cafe close to my accommodation. Josh was on time, and although he appeared worn out, his eyes were sharp. There was none of the uncomfortable avoidance I had witnessed during family meals. I appreciate your courage in speaking up. As soon as he took a seat, he said, although I was aware that Melissa struggled with self-control, I was unaware of her loss. I didn't even have to inquire. He was talking about the money, and I knew it. It's difficult to imagine you missed it, but I don't blame you, I said. Josh gave a head shake. She gave me a detailed account of how she gave you money. An envelope containing cash was placed on the kitchen counter. She always had an explanation when I asked. I laughed dryly. It must have been intended for someone else if there was an envelope. I questioned Melissa immediately after looking over the bank statements. She acknowledged that she only sometimes handed you money for pizza. She kept the rest. No longer furious. I nodded. I'm just so disappointed. Julia, even though I like Melissa, I won't allow her take advantage of you since you don't say as much. I gave him my full attention. What will you do then? Make sure she gives you a sincere apology and reimburses you for all of her debts. I took a while to respond. I kept thinking about what my mom had said. We must be the ones to bend in a family. However, my actions weren't motivated by a lack of love for my family. It was as a result of my ultimate decision to love myself. Melissa came up at my hotel the next morning. She had an envelope in her hand and her eyes were red. Josh folded his arms as he stood behind her. With a voice so quiet it was almost heard, she apologized for lying. exploiting your generosity, and using a family trip as a platform to manipulate you. I said nothing. She gave the envelope to me. I owe you this sum of money. Josh forced me to recalculate every dime. I didn't open it. I just inquired, glancing at her. Do you believe that things will ever return to how they were? She gave a head shake. No. And it could be a good thing, in my opinion. Uncertain whether it was a grin or something more bittersweet, I felt the corners of my lips lift a little. I need assistance, Melissa went on. Josh suggested that I begin going to a therapist. I'm not sure I can make things right, but I agreed, I answered slowly. Although you don't have to make all the changes at once, it's more than sufficient to begin by showing respect for others, especially the quiet ones. Melissa nodded, and she didn't appear to be the strong elder sister for the first time. Even though the vacation didn't go as planned, she appeared to be a lady seeking to rediscover herself after a string of mishaps, giving me more than any sunset or beach party could possibly offer. I gained clarity as a result. It provided Melissa with a mirror and offered my entire family the opportunity to transform, or to start learning how, at any rate. The first vacation was canceled 3 weeks later. Dad gave me a call. He remained silent. Julia was softly presented. I want to take you out to supper with your parents. This Saturday, visit the Pines, your favorite eatery. Despite their unable to see me, I nodded after a little pause. Perhaps we all needed a supper free of blame and arguments after everything. Just a new beginning. In a first for me, my mother got up first and pulled out a chair for me as soon as I entered the restaurant that evening. Dad grinned clumsily, like a teacher in a tiny town who had just stumbled through a lesson. We apologize, Mom said, even before to the arrival of the appetizers, for downplaying your emotions, for placing burdens on you that you never had to bear. When I looked at her, she appeared smaller for the first time, not in size, but rather in the way she talked from the heart rather than as the family's adult. Dad said, "We're planning another trip. This time, you can go and remain alone and just participate in the activities you choose to. You won't be asked to watch children. We swear." "What about Melissa?" I inquired. Mom mentioned she's in counseling after giving Dad a quick glance. To be honest, she's starting to understand she needs to change after Josh persuaded her. I took a while to reply. I reflected on the many years I had compromised by taking on obligations that weren't mine. I still harbored the dread that these assurances might vanish like morning mist. A part of me, nevertheless, wanted to give believing another go. Okay, I gave a nod. I'll leave. But I'm making my own reservations and driving myself. And I won't provide any notice if someone tries to rehire me as a babysitter. We comprehend. Mom nodded slightly and quietly when Dad stated it. The family group chat revived with a new name a week later, an excursion to the beach. Reset the version. Everyone made an effort to be lighthearted. Melissa exclusively used cheerful emoticons in her messages. No requests or instructions as previously. I discreetly reserved a motel 0.5 miles from the main area. I'm far enough away to have my privacy, yet close enough for meals. On the day of departure, I got up early, packed the car, brewed coffee, and departed the city before dawn. I was not hurried by any calls. Mom didn't text to ask whether you were on your way. For the first time, Melissa didn't remind me. When I got there, I signed in and asked the front desk to keep my room details private from anybody other than law enforcement in case of an emergency. I felt like a real grown-up in my own family. The receptionist gave me a warm grin. Many visitors do it. You're doing okay. I returned the smile. Setting limits isn't disobedience, I'd discovered. It's self-respect. We met at a seafood restaurant on the shore that afternoon. Everyone was present. Melissa brought a hired babysitter for the first time when she arrived with Josh and the boys. Ava was a young woman. Vivacious, upbeat, and obviously professional. I appreciate you coming, Melissa stated. I nodded without any conditions. Perhaps, just possibly, something had changed. Nobody brought up the previous year during the evening. I wasn't asked to help feed the kids or take them to the restroom. I informed my dad about a design project I was working on for a boutique hotel when we were sitting next to each other. He paid close attention, as if my words were more important than anything Melissa had ever uttered. After dinner, I went back to my hotel in silence. I was not followed. Nobody stopped me. And I sensed something as I opened the door to my room. I had this fantasy for years. On day 2 of the journey, there was true tranquility. In my peaceful hotel room, I awoke. Gentle sunshine coming in through the drapes. I prepared coffee, set on some soft music, and sat on the balcony with a book I just bought for the first time in years. My trip didn't begin with someone calling my name down a corridor or youngsters knocking on my door. Everything was still after the hotel's breakfast buffet. I got an SMS from Mom. "We're traveling to the seashore park this afternoon. Want to join?" I answered simply. "If I finish up on my end, I'll stop by later." No pressure, no guarantees. Above all, no guilt. I went to a local art gallery that I had been wanting to see since last year at around 10 in the morning. For the first time, I felt like this trip was really mine as I browsed the paintings, examining every brushstroke. My phone buzzed as I was about to leave the gallery and head to the beach for coffee. Melissa's hired babysitter, Ava, was there. "Hello, Julia. I apologize for calling, but Melissa requested if you could keep an eye on the boys for 15 minutes. It is urgent," she stated. I took a while to respond. A shiver went through my body. I steadied myself by taking a big breath. "I believe you're fantastic, Ava, but I'm not the babysitter," I responded hesitantly. Melissa ought to have prepared ahead of time or made alternate arrangements if she had an urgent matter. "Yes, I do comprehend. I'm just following her instructions." "It's all right. You're performing your duties. I appreciate you calling." After hanging up, I texted Josh right away. "Through Ava, your sister is attempting to transfer the children to me once more." Josh phoned after 2 minutes. His irritation was evident in his voice. "I appreciate you informing me. I'll see to that." The mood had changed by the time I arrived at the seashore park a bit later that afternoon. Josh was off playing soccer with the guys, and Melissa didn't give me a look. Mom whispered softly as she approached with a lemonade. "We were informed of the prior events. I apologize. Melissa ought to have been more aware." I just gave a nod. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to be authentic. Melissa eventually raised her voice while the family slept beneath the tree's shade. "Don't be sarcastic. No complaints. Just one little phrase." "I appreciate you not creating a commotion before." I gave her a steady, composed gaze. "I don't have to speak loudly to make someone understand what's wrong. I've had enough." Josh gave a mute nod, a silent affirmation, and nobody mentioned it after that. Again, just a few minutes of assistance. The days that followed were calm. I went on solitary walks, stopped by cafes by the sea, and even made friends with a local artist who asked me to participate in her outdoor painting sessions. When the family got together for dinners, beach barbecues, aquarium visits, or other group activities, on my terms, I joined. Pleasant, never coerced. On the last day of our trip, I wasn't avoiding them, but I also wasn't letting myself get dragged back into an old position. With the waves bathed in golden light from the sunset, the entire family gathered on the beach. For the first time, Melissa sat beside me instead of engrossed to her phone or running after the kids. "You've changed a lot." "And she answered quietly. "I believe I'm beginning to come to terms with it. Since I understood that promises don't bring about true change, I grinned without saying anything. It results from firmly saying no, even if it's misinterpreted. Even though this trip wasn't flawless, it was the first time I felt completely at liberty with my family. I set my boundaries and did it first, not because they totally altered. I went back to my design studio and my routine after the vacation. Everything returned to normal. However, I felt in my heart that something had permanently altered, for my family as well as for myself. While gathering drafts for a hotel project one weekday afternoon, Josh sent me a brief email with the subject update on Melissa. I was surprised by what I read in the first few paragraphs when I opened it. This morning, I took Melissa to her first therapy appointment. She didn't respond the way she used to, but it wasn't easy. She paid attention. Josh revealed that he and Melissa were both rendered dumbfounded by the therapist's statement. According to Josh, becoming a mother does not imply that you lose your identity, but it also does not provide you the authority to force others to shoulder your burdens. When Melissa understood how she had used motherhood as an excuse to manipulate everyone around her, she sobbed for much of the session. In particular, myself. Finally, Josh wrote, "Thank you, but I'm sorry it went this far. Melissa would never have taken a look at herself if you hadn't defended yourself. I took a while to respond, not out of rage or coldness. All I needed was a moment of silence to experience something uncommon, development from the same someone who formerly made me feel invisible. Melissa texted me 2 weeks later to invite me to lunch. Despite my initial hesitation, I consented. She used to take the children to the park, where we met in a little cafe. No kids, no disruptions. For the first time in years, she was on time and had no complaints or demands. So far, I've attended 4 sessions, Melissa said. And every time I come to the realization that I've never paid much attention to anyone. Not mom and dad, not Josh, not you in particular. I gave her a chance to speak. Being the eldest and spending some time as the lone adult in the home, in my opinion, I became accustomed to believing that I should be at the center of everything. I panicked instead of properly asking for help when I had children. I simply anticipated it, particularly from you. I gave a little nod. I get it, however, comprehension does not equate to acceptance. Furthermore, you ought not to have taken it, Melissa said sternly before grinning sorrowfully. Last week, Josh brought on a full-time nanny. Ava will teach the children fundamental life skills and assist with school runs. I no longer need your assistance. I only hope you'll notice my changes one day. She caught my attention for a long time. The old pride was gone, but I could see the fatigue. Rather, there was something tangible, humility, the realization that follows an extended period of overwhelm. Things began to go in a different manner after that day, steadily but slowly. Mom always started out when she phoned me once a week. Are you available? No, I need your assistance with something. Dad began emailing me photos of the garden bench he had constructed himself, rather than requesting that I do it for him. Melissa, on the other hand, was still getting used to being a sister rather than a leader. Occasionally, the old instincts returned. She was learning to stop before she crossed the line, though, and I now understood how to hold it. I maintained a healthy distance because I was repairing a bridge, not because I wanted to avoid people. One that is broad enough for both sides to meet, has more robust supports, and has distinct borders. If both of us decide to cross, Melissa sent me a handmade note when fall arrived. Just a single sentence in the rounded, well-known handwriting I recognized from high school. I appreciate you not being silent indefinitely. I kept the card for a long time because I understood that this was not the conclusion of the narrative, nor because I was overwhelmed. However, I would no longer be the only one listening without being heard, at least going forward. And to me, that was a lovely start to any type of transformation. A month or so after returning from vacation, I received an unexpected Instagram message. Emily, who worked at the little bookstore on the corner where I frequently spent my weekends, sent it to me. Hello, Julia. I'm not sure if it was fate or chance, but I knew it was you when I saw that Reddit post. I never thought someone from my actual life would relate to a narrative that started with irritation and ended with self-respect. So my heart skipped a beat, not out of shame. I had always been drawn to Emily. Not because she was ostentatious, but rather because of the way she smiled softly and slowly as she presented each book. Like someone who could see straight through others without saying anything, they were always nice and never superficial. I guess that post traveled further than I thought, I responded. She responded to her reply almost immediately. Since so many individuals have been Julia in their own families but have never found the right words, it did because it was true. We decided to get together at a downtown outdoor art display the next weekend. Nothing official. Just 2 folks strolling hand in hand while discussing art books and the importance of setting limits at a young age. I kept from Emily the number of restless nights I'd experienced due to a thoughtless remark made by a member of my family. I did, however, talk about how I eventually had to relearn how to speak up after having previously learned to be quiet. She mentioned something that would always stick in my memory while listening without passing judgment. Julia, you're not self-centered. All you're doing is loving who you are, and that is perfectly okay. That was the start of my relationship with Emily. Slowly. There is no pressure. Don't hurry. There's no need to cure one another. Only mutual respect, listening, and presence. In my family's case, things are going well, everyone in their own manner. Melissa goes on, therapy. The tension in our chats has subsided. She even once emailed me pictures of watercolor paintings she completed while taking an art class. I'm learning to let go rather than exert control. Josh now spends more time with the children. He takes them out alone every weekend, which gives Melissa a chance to relax or simply be herself. My prolonged quiet has taught them a valuable lesson. They no longer send mails asking if you can assist. Rather, they say, "We'd be delighted to have you join us for dinner." In a relationship that used to suffocate me, it may seem insignificant, but to me, it represents a whole different way of breathing. When I go, I still have my own room. I continue to choose peace above pleasing everyone and to say no when I'm exhausted. Emily was sitting on the wooden bench in my garden, leaning on my shoulder one early fall evening. We are surrounded by a gentle glow from the porch lights. "Do you think your family really gets it now?" she questioned, turning around. Squeezing her hand, I grinned. As long as they appreciate it, they don't need to comprehend everything. And I believe they do so at last this time. There is no miracle in my narrative. There isn't a dramatic change or a heartfelt conclusion when everything is resolved. However, it's a genuine path where I discovered how to love people by first learning to love myself and how to stand my own. What changed, if somebody asked me? After all those years, I would just say that I stopped saying yes to things that damaged me and began living as though I was worthy. This is a profoundly ingrained familial dynamic. Regaining the right to rest isn't the only aspect of my narrative. It serves as a reminder that extended periods of stillness can become taxing. Before I realized that love shouldn't require unreserved sacrifice, I was the easy one in the family. I have a family that is gradually learning to love without control, a healthy partnership, and my own life now. I'm not the free babysitter anymore. I am who I am, whole and self-sufficient. How do you feel about Julia's path? Was she overly strict? Or did she ultimately act appropriately to defend herself? Please leave your comments below and remember to subscribe to the channel for more impactful tales about personal and familial limits.